I still remember the moment as if it were carved in fire, 100 words that shattered my world and ignited an unquenchable fire within me. Under the sterile glow of fluorescent lights in our boardroom, my wife coldly announced, "You're out. I'm kicking you from my company." The words rang out like a death knell, slicing through decades of shared ambition and silent sacrifices. In that heart-stopping instant, as the stunned silence swallowed every hopeful plan we'd built together, I knew that nothing would ever be the same. Betrayal, humiliation, and the weight of shattered trust coalesced into a single, defiant resolve. I had a secret ace up my sleeve. For nearly 2 decades, I had believed that our marriage and our business were intertwined threads of a grand tapestry we were weaving together. We had built a company from the ground up, a venture that, against all odds, had become the cornerstone of our shared dreams. I poured my heart, soul, and countless sleepless nights into that company. I believed that, together, we could overcome any obstacle. But on that fateful day, her words cut through the facade of partnership, leaving me not only unemployed within our enterprise but also betrayed in the most personal way imaginable. The meeting had started as a routine quarterly review, a time when we'd normally celebrate small victories and discuss our next bold moves. The boardroom was filled with familiar faces, trusted colleagues, eager investors, and even a few loyal longtime employees who had witnessed the sweat and passion that went into our business. I took my usual seat at the table, confident and ready to present the latest projections that I had meticulously prepared. I had always prided myself on my contributions, the innovative strategies, the late nights at the office, and the unwavering dedication to making the company soar. Yet, as the meeting progressed, an unsettling tension began to build. My wife, who had once been my staunch partner in business, seemed distant and unusually formal. I could sense that something was off. The conversation drifted from mundane updates to something more serious. Finally, with a cold detachment that I had never heard before, she spoke up. "I'm sorry," she said, pausing as if savoring every syllable, "but your performance has not met the standards we need. Therefore, effective immediately, you're no longer part of the company." For a heartbeat, time seemed to freeze. I watched as murmurs spread around the room. I tried to process her words. No longer part of the company? I repeated internally, my mind racing to catch up. The numbers on the spreadsheet, the countless hours I had dedicated, all of it suddenly felt rendered meaningless. I felt exposed, humiliated, and hurt beyond measure. In that moment, my wife's voice, which had once been a source of comfort, transformed into an instrument of finality, a verdict that declared me unworthy of the legacy I had helped build. The shock was compounded by the steely gaze of the board members who, for once, seemed complicit in her decision. I could see their eyes flicker with a mixture of pity and disdain, as if they were witnessing the inevitable collapse of a man who had once been indispensable. I sat there, paralyzed, my pulse pounding in my ears, as the cold words sank in. The company, the very symbol of my hard work and perseverance, was now my estranged possession. The betrayal stung more than I could have ever imagined. I had not only been kicked out of a business I loved but also from the life I thought we were building together. After the meeting, I found a quiet corner in the empty office, away from the stares of colleagues and the echo of her final, dismissive words. My mind raced back over the years, the late nights refining strategies, the triumphs and failures that had defined my journey, and the subtle hints that perhaps our partnership was slowly fracturing. I had seen it in the way she sometimes hesitated when we discussed future plans, in the small, almost imperceptible sighs when I presented my ideas. Yet I had chosen to ignore them, clinging to the belief that love and business were inseparable. Now, that belief lay in ruins. I remember gathering my things slowly, each movement heavy with the weight of betrayal. The office, which had once been my arena of innovation and triumph, now felt like a cold, empty stage where I was no longer welcome. I stepped out into the cool air, the city's noise a stark contrast to the internal silence that had fallen over me. I walked without a destination, each step echoing with memories of the past and the uncertain promise of the future. That night, back in the solitude of my small apartment, I sat down with a battered journal, the one I had kept since my early days in the company, and began to write. Every word was an attempt to capture the tumultuous emotions surging within me, the searing anger, the deep sorrow, and the spark of determination that began to emerge. I wrote of how, in that pivotal moment, I vowed that I would not let this be the end of my story. I promised myself that I would dig deep, harness every ounce of the resilience I had built over the years, and prove to the world, and to my estranged wife, that I was more than just a failed partner. I would rise from this betrayal stronger, wiser, and with a secret ace up my sleeve that no one could ever take away. In the quiet hours of the night, as the words on the page bled together with my tears, I began to see a vision of what my future could be. I imagined channeling the raw energy of that humiliation into innovative strategies, into ventures that would not only secure my own legacy but redefine what success truly meant. I started planning in my mind a bold, audacious project, something that would turn this painful moment into a stepping stone for a new beginning. The idea was both exhilarating and terrifying, to take the very company I had helped build and transform it in ways that my wife and her allies could never have imagined. That vision, however, was tempered by a deep, gnawing uncertainty about what lay ahead. I wondered how I could rebuild from the ashes of such a public rejection. The betrayal cut so deeply that it seemed impossible to imagine a future without the constant shadow of humiliation. And yet, in the midst of that despair, I felt the first stirrings of a plan to reclaim my dignity, to prove that my worth was not defined by her sneers. I resolved that I would keep my secret close, a masterstroke, an ace up my sleeve that would one day be the key to my redemption. In those agonizing early hours, as the city slowly awakened outside my window, I made a silent promise to myself. I vowed that I would not be defeated by this betrayal. I would learn from it, grow from it, and eventually, I would show everyone that I was worth every ounce of the effort I had invested in our shared dreams. The pain was profound, but it was also the fuel that ignited the fire of defiance deep within me, a fire that would guide me through the darkness and toward a future where my self-worth was undeniable. As the first rays of sunlight began to filter through the curtains, I closed my journal and took a deep, steadying breath. I was no longer the man who had been cast aside with a dismissive, "You're out." I was beginning to understand that this moment, as devastating as it was, marked the turning point of my life. I would rebuild from these ruins, and I would do so on my own terms. I would nurture the seeds of innovation and resilience that had been sown in the depths of my pain, and I would forge a new legacy that was solely mine, a legacy that would speak of triumph over betrayal, of the power of self-belief, and of the relentless pursuit of dignity. In the immediate days after that shattering boardroom announcement, I found myself oscillating between a crushing sense of betrayal and a fierce, burning resolve to reclaim what I believed was rightfully mine. The echo of my wife's icy dismissal, "You're out. I'm kicking you from my company," reverberated in my mind day and night. While the office corridors that once bustled with the promise of shared dreams now whispered with quiet judgment, I locked myself away in the solitude of my modest apartment, determined to transform my seething pain into a meticulously crafted plan of retribution and renewal. I spent countless hours poring over every financial report and company ledger, digging through the layers of a business that had been built on decades of tradition but had become stagnant under my father-in-law's rule. I realized that beneath the polished facade lay systemic weaknesses and outdated practices that I had, over the years, carefully observed and documented. This was my secret ace, the blueprint of an idea that could not only prove my worth but also propel the company into a vibrant, modern future. I began to sketch out strategies late into the night, my fingers flying over the keyboard as I mapped out a radical restructuring plan. Every statistic, every projection became a silent retort to the dismissive words I had been subjected to. The more I studied the company's inner workings, the more I uncovered signs that the very structure of the business was ripe for innovation. Our marketing strategies were relics of a bygone era, our digital presence was almost non-existent, and the management hierarchy, rigid and archaic, stifled fresh ideas. In my journal, its pages now filled with numbers, market analysis, and strategic blueprints, I began to see a future where I could lead a revolution in our operations. This wasn't merely about revenge, it was about proving that my vision, my hard work, and my relentless determination were the keys to transforming the business. I drafted proposals on paper, each line a commitment to modernity and efficiency, and every paragraph was laced with the determination to prove that I was more than the sum of my past failures. In those early days of planning, I reached out discreetly to a few trusted colleagues who had quietly harbored their own doubts about the company's stagnant direction. Late-night conversations in dimly lit cafes became the crucible in which our shared frustrations and aspirations were forged into actionable plans. One of these colleagues, David, an analytical mind with a knack for spotting inefficiencies, confided in me, "I've seen this company suffocate under old ways for too long. If you have the vision, you can break these chains. You're not the problem, they're the problem." His words were a balm to my wounded pride and a powerful validation of the secret strategy that was taking shape. We discussed potential mergers, modern tech upgrades, and even rebranding initiatives that would reposition the company as a forward-thinking leader in our industry. Every whispered conversation, every nod of agreement, fueled my growing conviction that I was on the right path, even if it meant orchestrating a coup against the very institution that had once been my shared dream. Amid this strategic whirlwind, I also had to confront the painful reality of my personal isolation. The day my wife delivered that fatal announcement, I felt the weight of every sacrifice I had made for our partnership. The countless late nights at the office, the relentless pursuit of financial stability for our future, none of it seemed to matter in the face of her callous dismissal. That moment had left me not only jobless within our enterprise but also profoundly alone. I began to question whether I had ever truly been seen for who I was, or if I had simply been a convenient placeholder in her carefully curated life. The hurt and humiliation became a double-edged sword that spurred me on even as it threatened to engulf me in despair. I spent long evenings wandering the city streets, the neon glow of downtown a stark contrast to the dark thoughts swirling in my mind. In those solitary walks, I grappled with my shattered self-esteem and the realization that if I were to rebuild my life, I had to do so from the ruins of this betrayal. Every step was heavy with the memories of the boardroom, where my wife's words had cut deeper than any financial loss could measure. I recalled the mocking laughter of her friends, a sound that haunted me in the quiet moments, and I vowed that I would never allow that scorn to define me again. I had a secret ace up my sleeve, and I was determined to use it not only as a tool for corporate resurgence but as a declaration of my inherent worth. Late one stormy night, with rain pounding the windows like a relentless drum, I sat in my study surrounded by papers, spreadsheets, and the scattered remnants of old business plans. In that intense solitude, I drafted the first full version of my clandestine blueprint, a comprehensive, multi-phase plan to modernize the company and reclaim control. I detailed every step, from a complete digital overhaul that would replace our outdated systems with cutting-edge technology, to a reorganization of our management that would foster innovation and accountability. Every figure, every projection was calculated meticulously, not just as a business strategy but as a personal manifesto against every dismissive word I had endured. I emailed drafts to a trusted friend, Sarah, who had once been my mentor and who had always seen potential in my ideas despite the skepticism of others. "This is brilliant," she wrote back, her words a mixture of astonishment and quiet pride. "It's more than a plan, it's a revolution. You have every right to lead the way." Her validation was like a lifeline, bolstering my resolve to push forward even as the echoes of my wife's betrayal threatened to drown out my ambitions. But the more I worked on the blueprint, the more I realized that this secret mission was not without its risks. Every day, as I delved deeper into the company's financial labyrinth and reached out to potential allies, I was acutely aware that my actions could ignite a full-blown corporate war. My father-in-law, whose approval had once been a cornerstone of my success, might soon learn of my clandestine maneuvers. I braced myself for the inevitable fallout, knowing that if this plan came to light, it would not only shatter my professional relationships but could also spell the end of my marriage and the complete collapse of the fragile world I had known. In those moments of trepidation, I reminded myself of the alternative: to remain a passive victim, to let my self-worth be determined by the bitter words of my wife and the derision of her friends. The idea of accepting that fate was unbearable. I had spent years fighting for my vision, for the right to be seen and valued, and I was not about to let that struggle be in vain. I was determined to turn the tables, to use every lesson learned from the pain of rejection to fuel a comeback that would resonate not just in the corridors of our company, but in every aspect of my life. As I refined my strategic plans, I began reaching out to a small group of former employees who had long been disillusioned by the outdated practices and nepotism that had plagued the company. We held secret meetings in discreet locations, a quiet restaurant at the edge of town, a small conference room in an unremarkable office building, where ideas flowed freely and each of us spoke with a passion born of years of being sidelined. These gatherings were raw and unfiltered, and they filled me with a renewed sense of purpose. Together, we discussed ways to modernize operations, to innovate our product lines, and to eventually challenge the very authority that had cast me out. It was a collective awakening, a shared realization that the company, much like our lives, was in dire need of transformation. Despite the growing momentum, I was not blind to the emotional scars that still marred my heart. The face of my wife, the laughter of her friends, and the memory of that fateful day were constant companions in my thoughts. I would lie awake at night, the glow of my computer screen illuminating my determined yet haunted expression, and wonder if I would ever be able to silence the echoes of that public humiliation. But even in those dark hours, a small ember of hope glowed steadily within me, a hope that with every calculated step, with every innovative idea, I was building a future where my worth was undeniable. In a particularly charged meeting one evening, as I presented a refined version of my blueprint to a trusted circle of advisors, the gravity of my mission became painfully clear. One of them, an industry veteran with a no-nonsense attitude, leaned forward and said, "If you pull this off, you won't just be reviving the company, you'll be rewriting the rules of the game. But be prepared, there's no turning back once you set this in motion." His words, delivered with a steely gaze, resonated deeply with me. I knew that the path I had chosen was fraught with peril and that the stakes were as high as they could possibly be. Yet, in that moment, I felt an unyielding certainty. I was ready to risk everything, to challenge the status quo, to confront the very person who had once called me worthless, and to prove once and for all that my worth was not defined by their shallow judgments. As the weeks turned into a blur of clandestine meetings, late-night strategy sessions, and relentless personal work, the secret blueprint took shape. Every detail, from the revamped marketing strategy to the proposed technological upgrades, was a silent testament to my resilience and ingenuity. I knew that the coming days would test my resolve in ways I had never imagined, that the consequences of this secret mission could ripple through every corner of my life. But I also knew that, deep down, I had unearthed a strength that could not be measured by the standards of those who had once dismissed me. And so, with every ounce of determination fueling my efforts, I committed to this hidden crusade, a mission to reclaim not only the company but my very identity. I was no longer the man cast aside, the one who was ridiculed for being jobless and unworthy. I was a visionary, a leader armed with a secret ace that would one day serve as the turning point in my personal and professional rebirth. Every calculated risk, every late-night conversation, every carefully crafted line in my blueprint was a declaration. I would rise from this betrayal, and my worth would be undeniable. I woke the morning after that fateful evening with a mix of resolve and sorrow that felt as heavy as concrete yet as potent as a fresh spark. Every echo of that night's humiliation, my wife's callous words, the biting laughter of her friends, and the piercing silence that followed, still reverberated through my mind. But as the sun's first rays broke through the clouds, I realized I had reached a turning point. This was not the end of my story, but the catalyst for an entirely new chapter. I resolved then to reclaim my dignity, rebuild my self-worth, and transform the painful memories into stepping stones toward a future defined by resilience and unyielding self-respect. In the days that followed, I began to take small yet deliberate actions. I knew that healing was not an overnight process, it was a journey marked by both setbacks and triumphs. I started by cleaning the slate of my physical space. I rearranged my modest apartment, decluttering every corner of my living room and bedroom until the space felt like a sanctuary dedicated solely to my own well-being. I filled the walls with photographs of happier times, a family vacation we once shared, candid snapshots of my son laughing uncontrollably, and even quiet portraits of my wife from the early days of our marriage when hope still glowed brightly in her eyes. Each picture was a reminder that while some memories had soured, others still held the promise of better days, and I was determined to let those be the foundation for what was to come. Every morning, I took a long walk before the city fully awoke. In those quiet moments, with the chill of dawn brushing against my skin and the gentle hum of waking life all around me, I allowed myself to reflect on the betrayal and, gradually, to let go of the bitterness that had once threatened to consume me. I began to repeat a simple mantra: I am more than what was taken from me. I am the architect of my own destiny. With each step, the weight of that devastating night seemed to lift, replaced by a steady rhythm of determination. I recalled the hurtful laughter of her friends and the dismissive tone of my wife's voice, but instead of letting those memories cripple me, I began to use them as fuel, a reminder that I deserved respect, and that I was capable of rising above the cruelty. At work, I channeled this newfound resolve into every project I led. I threw myself into innovative strategies, aiming to not only prove my worth to the company but to redefine its future. I spearheaded new initiatives that modernized our operations and streamlined our processes. Meetings that once filled me with dread now became arenas where I could share fresh ideas with confidence. Each small victory at work, every congratulatory nod from a colleague, every promising sign from a client, reinforced the truth that I was capable of more than I had ever been allowed to believe. Slowly, I reclaimed a measure of respect and began to see the first signs of professional resurgence. Yet, while my professional life was beginning to stabilize, the personal fallout still left raw scars. I wrestled with an ocean of conflicting emotions, deep sorrow for the love I had lost, a simmering anger that sometimes surged uncontrollably, and a persistent sense of abandonment that lingered in quiet moments. I sought solace in therapy, returning to sessions with Dr. Lin, a gentle, insightful counselor who helped me navigate the labyrinth of betrayal and self-reclamation. Healing, she reminded me during one particularly difficult session, is not about erasing the past, it's about integrating it into who you are, so that the pain transforms into a source of strength. Her words slowly permeated my guarded heart, urging me to see that forgiveness was not an act of capitulation but a necessary step toward reclaiming my future. One evening, during a session that left me both raw and hopeful, I shared a recurring image that had haunted me since that dreadful vacation day, the image of my wife's friends laughing, and my own reflection in a window, distorted by tears and disbelief. Dr. Lin urged me to imagine that reflection as a symbol of my potential, a future self not defined by the mockery of others, but by the courage to rebuild from the rubble. That night, I made a quiet promise to myself: I would not allow the ghosts of that moment to hold me back. I would channel every ounce of pain into forging a path that was uniquely mine. Emboldened by the support of therapy and the steady encouragement of friends who had stood by me through thick and thin, I began to explore new horizons. I enrolled in courses that would help me upgrade my skills and expand my professional vision. I read voraciously, books on leadership, innovation, and personal transformation, to rebuild my inner narrative and to construct a vision for the future that was not tainted by past betrayals. I even started writing a blog, pouring my heart into essays that chronicled my journey from humiliation to empowerment. The feedback was humbling. Strangers reached out, sharing their own stories of loss and recovery, affirming that my struggle resonated far beyond the confines of my own pain. Their words, gentle and supportive, were a powerful reminder that the journey toward reclaiming self-worth was a shared human experience. I also rekindled my passion for travel, something I had once cherished as a couple, now reclaimed as a personal escape and a symbol of my new independence. I planned small solo trips to places that had always inspired me: the rugged coastlines of Maine, the serene landscapes of the Pacific Northwest, even a brief sojourn to a sun-dappled Mediterranean town. Each journey was a meditation on freedom, a quiet rebellion against the constraints of my past. As I wandered through unfamiliar streets, I allowed myself to be enveloped by the beauty of the world, and in those moments of exploration, I felt the first true stirrings of healing. I discovered that the world was vast and full of wonder, and that my own story was just one among many, a narrative that could be rewritten with every new experience. My son, though still young and blissfully unaware of the full extent of our familial turmoil, became the beacon that guided me through the darkness. Every time I looked into his bright, untainted eyes, I was reminded of the promise I had made, to protect him, to nurture his dreams, and to ensure that he would grow up in a world where love and respect reigned supreme. I devoted myself to spending as much quality time with him as possible. We shared long walks in the park, playful afternoons at local museums, and quiet evenings where we cooked simple meals together. His laughter, his curiosity, and even his occasional, innocent questions about life fueled a fierce determination in me. I vowed that no matter how bitter the world around us might be, I would create a haven of stability and hope for him, a future that he could look back on with pride, even if I had to fight tooth and nail for every opportunity. In the midst of these personal and professional endeavors, I began to sense that the scars of betrayal, while they would never fully disappear, were slowly being transformed. Each day, as I built a new routine, one that blended discipline with moments of quiet joy, I felt my old wounds closing, replaced by a hard-won resilience. I learned to forgive not for my wife's sake or even for my own, but as a liberating act that allowed me to move forward without the constant weight of the past dragging me down. I began to see that every setback, every painful memory, was a reminder not of my inadequacy, but of my capacity to overcome, to rebuild, and to rise stronger than before. One pivotal moment came during a rainy afternoon at a local cafe, where I sat with an old friend who had once shared in my dreams. Over cups of steaming coffee, we talked about the nature of betrayal and the strange, paradoxical beauty of starting over. Sometimes, he said softly, life has a way of breaking us open so that we can fill the emptiness with something new, something that truly reflects who we are inside. His words, delivered with a quiet intensity, struck a chord deep within me. In that conversation, I realized that the journey I was on was not one of endless despair, but of transformation, a process where the remnants of my past, painful as they were, would serve as the foundation for a future defined by my own dreams and unwavering resolve. As the seasons changed, I began to see the fruits of my labor both in my work and in my personal life. The projects I led at the company started to gain momentum, and whispers of our renewed direction began to circulate among our clients and investors. In meetings, I could sense that the board was beginning to acknowledge the innovative spirit I had cultivated, a spirit that had been honed by adversity and tempered by the relentless pursuit of excellence. With each small success, the sting of my wife's betrayal faded a little more, replaced by a burgeoning sense of pride and vindication. At the same time, my blog began to attract a modest following of readers who resonated with my story. Comments poured in from people who, like me, had once been left in the shadows of betrayal and humiliation. Their words of encouragement, their shared experiences, and their unwavering belief in the power of renewal gave me the courage to keep writing, to keep sharing my journey as a beacon for anyone who felt alone in their struggle. In those digital exchanges, I discovered that my pain had the power to inspire, to create connections that transcended the isolation of my own experience. Every message, every supportive comment, was a small affirmation that I was not defined by the cruelty of others, but by the strength with which I chose to rebuild my life. The culmination of all this hard-fought progress came on a crisp, clear morning when I was invited to speak at an industry conference on resilience and leadership. Standing on a stage before a room filled with attentive faces, I recounted my journey, not just the professional battles, but the deeply personal struggle against betrayal and loss. I spoke of the day my wife dismissed me with a sneer, the loneliness of an empty hotel lobby, and the subsequent awakening that transformed my pain into purpose. The response was overwhelming, the room filled with applause and quiet nods of understanding. In that moment, I felt a deep sense of validation, not only from those around me, but from within myself. I had reclaimed my worth, and in doing so, I had set an example that no one, not even the harshest betrayal, could break a man determined to rise above it. Now, as I reflect on that tumultuous period, the endless nights of sorrow, the slow, painful rebuilding, and the eventual triumph of reclaiming my identity, I know that I have emerged stronger, wiser, and more resolute than ever before. The scars of betrayal will forever be part of me, etched into my memory as reminders of the battles I fought and the resilience I forged. But they no longer define me. Instead, they serve as a testament to the power of the human spirit to overcome, to transform, and to thrive in the face of overwhelming odds. I continue to live each day with a deep sense of purpose, driven by the memory of my wife's callous dismissal and the countless sacrifices I made in the name of love. Every step I take, every decision I make, is a reaffirmation of my worth, a declaration that I am more than the sum of my failures, more than the product of my betrayals. I have rebuilt my life on my own terms, blending hard-earned professional success with the quiet, steadfast joy of personal growth. My journey has taught me that true strength lies not in avoiding pain, but in facing it head-on and emerging on the other side transformed. As the sun rises on a new day, I look forward with cautious optimism and an unyielding resolve. I will continue to push boundaries at work, innovate in ways that inspire those around me, and nurture the relationships that matter most, especially the bond with my son, who remains the brightest light in my life. Though the road ahead may still be paved with challenges and moments of lingering sorrow, I now carry with me the unshakable belief that every setback is simply a setup for an even greater comeback. This is not the end of my story, it is the beginning of a new chapter, one where my worth is defined by my own actions, my own dreams, and my unwavering commitment to building a future that is rich in love, success, and the quiet triumph of resilience. I stand here today, not as a broken man, but as a testament to the power of determination, the strength of the human spirit, and the endless possibilities that emerge when you refuse to be defined by someone else's shallow judgments.